Thank you very much, Adam. I'll be happy to share a little of the challenges and opportunities and solutions that SSAB is working on right now. And I'm not going to waste a lot of time on a corporate presentation, but just to put things into perspective, we are a relatively tiny Scandinavia and North America-based steel company. We barely make the top 50 list of steel companies in the world. But we are large in a couple of aspects. We are admittedly the largest single CO2 emitter in Sweden. We make up 10% of the Swedish CO2 emissions, and that is something that we want to change, and that is what we're going to talk about today. But we're also large insofar that we sell our products worldwide, and when we're talking about high-strength steels, strong steels, we have roughly a third of the world market, which is something that we're quite proud of. And we're not going to spend much time on that, but that is also something that helps us make the world a little more sustainable. The stronger the steel is that our customers are using, the less steel they are using, and the less resources and the lower of an environmental impact they have. If we take a step backwards and look at the development of steel use and steel consumption in the world, is that actually a little more than doubled since the beginning of this century, from around 750 million tons per year to above 1.8 billion last year. And that is driven by the development that we see in the world with a growing world population, with a growing standard of living, with a growing urbanization. And all of this drives investment needs in infrastructure, transportation, and so on. And that is also what we see in the increased steel use in the world. As you can see from the red curve here, a lot of this increase has come from China, which has built a lot of infrastructure in the last 20 years. And you can also see that both in 2009 and in 2013, China made up almost exactly half of the world's steel consumption. And China actually peaked in 2013, but in the rest of the world, the steel consumption is still increasing. And that gives us a couple of challenges. If we put this in relation to the reduction of emissions from the steel industry that is necessary according to the Paris Agreement, and if we in that context also look at the increased use of steel in the world, then we see that these two charts, they don't really make any sense unless we can find another way of making steel. You can also see that when we indicate the global steel demand, a lot of that can be covered by the dark blue section here, which is recirculated steel scrap, but not all of it. For the foreseeable future, we need to be able to make steel not only from recycled content, but also from virgin materials, from iron ore in a sustainable way. And that means that we need a new steel making process. We cannot afford the currently roughly 1.8 tons of CO2 per ton of steel produced in the future. We must get much closer to zero. What we're talking about is a reduction of more than 90%, and that really means that we need to reinvent the steel making process. And that's what we mean with our new hybrid technology. This is our solution and our way of making fossil-free steel in the future. We were looking at the current practice when it comes to steel making, and what we see on the left-hand side here is the dominant process today, the blast furnace process, which is associated with a lot of CO2 emissions, roughly 2 tons of CO2 per ton of steel if you look at the entire process. And that is due to the fact that iron ore is pretty much iron oxide. It's iron and it's oxygen, and in order to get to the iron, you need to remove the oxygen, which, since the blast furnace was invented in 1300 something, has been done with carbon in the form of coke. And then the oxygen moves to carbon, and you get CO2 as a byproduct from the steel making. There is basically only one alternative method available today, and that's what we see on the right-hand side. That's direct reduction. There are a few plants like this in the world, but it's not very common, and it's usually only commercially viable if you happen to build your steel plant on top of a natural gas resource. But still, we were looking at this, and we thought that the logical step for us would be to use direct reduction, but instead of natural gas, we would be using hydrogen gas instead. What would happen then? Well, then the oxygen in the iron ore would move not to carbon, but to hydrogen and form H2O, also known as water, as a byproduct. And furthermore, we can use the fact that in Scandinavia we have a virtually CO2-free power grid in order to make hydrogen out of water with electrolysis. Hydrogen that we put into our process, and then we get the water back as a byproduct. And the clever thing with this is that hydrogen is a commodity that we can actually store. And with an increasing amount of renewable energy sources in the power grid, we have the situation already today, especially in the summer, when the sun is shining, the wind is blowing, and the rivers are full, that we produce more electricity than we can use in these countries. And then we can take that excess electricity, produce a lot of hydrogen that we can then store and use as it is needed in our own processes. And vice versa, on a cold, dark winter night with less electricity available, we can actually take our load off the network. We can stop making hydrogen and use hydrogen that we have already produced and stored instead. That way, we can not only make fossil-free steel, but we can also help to make sure that we're utilizing every drop of renewable electricity that we have available in the system today. Now, the end product of the traditional blast furnace method is liquid iron. When you're using direct reduction, you get a solid sponge iron. And in order to process that further, we need to melt it down to liquid form. And for that, exactly the same technology is used as we are using for recycled steel scrap today. We put it in an electric arc furnace and we melt it down to liquid form using electricity. But from then on in the steel making process, in the alloying, in the casting, in the heating, in the rolling, in the heat treatment, coating, and so on, we will be using exactly the same processes as today, just making sure that we're using fossil-free fuels and fossil-free electricity. And it is in these downstream processes that we really create the properties of the steel that we make. And that is the reason that we can confidently say that our steels in the future will have at least the same performance as they do today, just with the added value of being fossil-free. Now, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are steel plants. We announced this initiative in April 2016, together with our cooperation partners LKAB, our iron ore supplier, and Vattenfall, our electricity provider. And we were running a pre-feasibility study in 2016 and 2017, and we published the results in February 2018. And everything that we found out during these years made us even more convinced that this is exactly the right way to go. So in 2018, we also announced to the world that we were going to build a pilot plant, a small facility, but an industrial facility where we can learn how to run this process in an industrial environment. This idea as such is not new, but nobody has been doing this on an industrial scale in the past, and that is what we need to learn. And as we progressed with our studies and planning, we grew even more convinced. And without waiting for the pilot plant, in September 2019, at the UN Climate Summit in New York, we announced to the world that we were also going to build a demonstration plant, a real industrial-sized plant to go into production in 2026. And we're talking about a plant that will have a capacity of more than 1.3 million tons. So at the same time, we also made the commitment to our customers and other stakeholders that as of 2026, we will sell fossil-free steel as a commercial product on commercial terms. And in fact, we have two objectives as SSAB. As I said, we have committed to introduce fossil-free steel to the market in 2026, and our long-term objective is to latest by 2045 be probably the world's first entirely fossil-free steel company. Now the pilot plant is there. It was inaugurated in August last year by the Swedish Prime Minister and Minister for Climate. And it is now up and running. We're making trial runs. It doesn't have any commercial production as such, but we are in the process of running campaigns, testing parameters, evaluating the results, and learn how to run this process in an industrial environment. And if we look at the time schedule a bit longer term, what we can see is that we have the pilot plant, and we will be running the pilot plant to learn more and more towards 2025 or so. We're right now also in the middle of preparing our pilot for hydrogen storage in order to optimize our use of electricity, like we talked about before. And when it comes to the demonstration plant, the real industrial-sized plant with a capacity of more than 1 million tons, we have a couple of months ago announced the site decision. It will be built in northern Sweden. We will start the erection activities towards 2023, and it will be started up towards 2025 in order to be able to deliver those commercial products in 2026. And at the same time, we're also building a new electric arc furnace at our Oxelösund facility, the arc furnace that we need in order to handle the sponge iron that we get from this fossil-free iron making process. And at the same time, we're closing down the blast furnace that we are currently using at our Oxelösund facility. And that will then be the first blast furnace closure, and we will then step by step close down the remaining 3 blast furnaces that we have in operation in order, again, to be an entirely fossil-free steel company in the future. We have a line here that says customers and partnerships, which indicate that we are right now in a phase where we're open to closer cooperation to a couple of carefully selected customers and partners that have high ambitions themselves when it comes to sustainability, customers and partners that want to be part of a fossil-free value chain, customer and partners that want to help us create demand for fossil-free end products already before 2026. And as we said before, starting then in 2026, we will start delivering all SSAB steel products also in a fossil-free version. And this is where we will build this demonstration plant. It will be located next to the iron ore mine operated by our iron ore supplier LKAB in Gällivare in northern Sweden. As I said, it will have a capacity of 1.3 million tons in the first stage, and we're looking at a little more than double that until 2030. And we have now put it next to the iron ore mine in order to have short transportation route, in order to have good transportation and logistic solutions that are already in place, and also to be able to optimize electricity supply and energy optimization. And speaking of energy optimization, this is a very schematic picture of our hydrogen storage. We will be using underground caverns, steel line caverns, in order to make them hold the hydrogen. And this is where we will store the hydrogen in order, again, to produce hydrogen when we have excess electricity, and then being able to use that as it is needed in our own processes. And what makes us a little unique, and what I would like to underline once more, is that we're not only looking into our own steelmaking processes, but that we are doing this together with our partners for iron ore and for electricity. So LKAB has committed to going fossil-free as well, so that in 2026, when we put fossil-free steel in the market, there will be no diesel-powered machines in the mine. There will be no fossil fuels used in the pelletizing process. And in the same way, Vattenfall will make sure that we're only using fossil-free electricity, so that we really have a fossil-free value chain all the way from the iron ore mine to the SSAB factory gate, and so that we can really offer our customers and partners a chance to be part of this fossil-free value chain and extend this fossil-free value chain to their customers and end users. this has been said before, but it deserves to be repeated. What we're talking about in our new processes is really changing the iron making part of the process where we have the major environmental impact today. The downstream processes where we actually create the properties of the steels that we make, they will remain the same as today. They will be electrified, they will be using fossil-free fuels and fossil-free electricity, but they will be basically the same as today. And that is the reason that we can confidently say to our customers and partners that our steels will have at least the same performance in the future as they do today. If you want to read more and follow us on this journey, please feel free to look into ssab.com/fossil-free, where you will learn all about our fossil-free steels and the steps that we take in order to create the world's first fossil-free steel company. Or look at ssab.com/sustainability, where you will also be able to learn all about other SSAB sustainability initiatives, such as sourcing, diversity, inclusion, and so on. And this together is our way of living the SSAB vision that we've had for more than 10 years now of a stronger, lighter, and a little more sustainable world. Thank you so much for listening.